On this video, we're going to talk about how to choose an ice fishing rod. If you got here from our ice fishing basics video, do me a favor, go down in the comments below and let me know. If you haven't seen that video yet, we're going to link it in this card right above. One last thing before we get started, if you would, do me a favor, hit the like button if you like the video, hit the subscribe button if you find some value in the content. All of those things helps us grow the channel. Okay, let's get started. When it comes to choosing a rod, the first thing I like to do is figure out what fish are we going to be fishing for the most. That lets us look for something called the weight of the rod. Ice fishing rods usually have categories that start at light, medium, medium heavy, or heavy. And what that means is the lightest rod is going to be the flimsiest rod for the smaller fish, and the heaviest rod is going to be the stiffest rod for the bigger fish. That's the first thing we need to do. So we're going to have a running example of I'm fishing for walleye. Walleye is a medium fish. Most of the time when I'm fishing for walleyes, I choose a medium rod. The next thing we have to do is we have to look at, do we want graphite? Do we want fiberglass? So first and foremost, graphite is a little more expensive most of the time. This is an example of a graphite rod. Graphite rods are much more sensitive, they're lighter, and they usually have what they call a faster tip. This is a great visual of what a fast tip looks like, okay? What that means is that it stays straight, quick bend at the end. When you look at something called an action of the rod, okay, the action is how quickly does it bend. So this rod right here would be considered either a fast or an extra fast. You notice how it's nice and straight and then it has a quick bend. And this rod right here would be a great example of what we call a slow rod. You notice how it goes the whole length of the rod and it bends all the way down. That's the difference, and that's what fast versus slow or extra fast means. Okay, back to graphite. So graphite is more sensitive. Like I said before, it has a stiffer backbone, usually a quicker tip. What this is great for is jigging. If you're actively using the rod, this is awesome. Why? Is because you can feel everything through the sensitivity. You have enough control because of the backbone to move everything really well, but you have enough in the tip, enough flexion in the tip that you can really see the bites. So you can really get your hook sets in there nice and sharp. You get that great backbone to drive the hooks in, but you still have that flexibility in the tip to let you see what's going on. The next material is something called fiberglass. Now, fiberglass tends to be your cheaper rods, and they tend to have more bend throughout the entirety of the rod. Again, this example that I used earlier of the slow, this is a fiberglass rod. I also have a really long fiberglass rod here that has a slow backbone, but a pretty quick tip on this one as well, so it's kind of a nice middle ground of things. There is a lot less feel in a fiberglass rod, and it's much less sensitive, and it's a little bit heavier. And so, depending on how you're fishing, a fiberglass rod might be exactly what you need, or a graphite rod might be exactly what you need. So some examples of what we would use these different things for, if I've got a small tungsten jig, I have the small tungsten jig on a nice backbone with the fast tip. I can work that jig well, but I can see the bites. Awesome. If I'm running a dead stick or a bobber or a bait, like an actual live bait rig, I usually use these fiberglass rods. And here's another example of the fiberglass rod. You get a nice solid hook set in a way that's not quite as aggressive like you would in something like this. That's pretty much the main difference between the two classes, we'll say, of ice fishing rods, your graphite or your fiberglass. The next thing you have to look for is the length. Are you going to be fishing inside of some sort of a shack? Are you going to be fishing out in the open? Are you going to be standing and going hole to hole? Those all play into what kind of rod and what length you're going to get. So for example, I've got this little guy right here. I think he's 24 inches. I use this as a small bobber rod for perch or a dead stick for perch. It just sits and it can be inside of my house, and I can just, do what I need to with that little guy right there. But I have that rod's big brother here, which is, I think it's a 42-inch rod. Okay, so I'm gonna have trouble fishing inside of an ice shack with this guy. But this is a great rod to have as a dead stick if I have it outside, or if I have it on like a tip-up style rig or automatic hook setter. This guy can be outside, it can be set up. It can really take a lot when it works as a dead stick. It can take a lot of abuse before that fish even feels it's there. And again, you get a really nice, big, solid, but not too aggressive hook set. Then you get into the kind of rods that you're using inside of a house, right? So here's your main jigging rods. A small graphite blank that I can work really easily in maybe a flip over shack. Right on. The same difference again here. This is a little longer. This is a 36-inch. This is the maximum length that I would want to have inside of a house. Even this rod here tends to be a little bit too long for what I like. I tend to set the hook and then I'll hit the side of the shack. But this is a good in-betweener. If I'm hole hopping outside, this is my jam because I can stand up and still have a lot of good action with this. These two guys right here, lengthwise, we're looking at, this is a 32 and this is a 28. These are about as perfect for in a house as you can get. They have enough length to them that you can really play the fish, but they're short enough that you can maneuver these things within the house. That is the big considerations when it comes to choosing length. Another thing to think about really quickly is the length is going to have a big effect on the actual action of the rod. So when I have two rods that are made of the exact same material, they're the same rod, just two different sizes, two different weights. This is a medium, this is a light. The shortness of this makes it so the tip is basically the whole rod. So look how much bend there is. Where you get the length of this, it has a lot more chance to have this solid, meaty backbone back here. So you get more of that bend in the front and still have some muscle back behind it. To wrap the video up, the last thing you want to think about is the price of the rods that you're going to be buying. You can buy rods. These are Schooley's rods. I love these little things. They're a really cool rod for how much they were. I think this rod was like $12. They're awesome. You can get these for really cheap, especially when you're getting the fiberglass rods. They tend to be much cheaper. When you start getting into the actual graphite rods, they tend to be a little more expensive, but I'll tell you what you pay for. There are categories of each of these. You can buy cheap fiberglass rods. This is a cheaper fiberglass rod. So is this. You can get cheaper graphite rods. This is a cheaper graphite rod. The difference between the cheaper graphite rods and the more expensive ones are going to be potentially some sort of a custom sanding that gives it the kind of action that you want, but mostly it's the components. Notice that this one has a little bit of a split handle here. There's no component holding this on, just some tape. And then you've got some cheaper eyelets. When you start getting to the more expensive graphite rods, what you're getting a lot of the times are titanium eyelets that spring a bit. They're more durable, they're lighter, a little more sensitive. You can go as cheap with all of these as maybe paying for $20, $25 for a cheap graphite rod, anywhere from $15 and up for a cheap glass rod, all the way up to, you can buy some graphite rods that are looking at $150, $200. That is going to be up to you, but what I recommend for everyone, especially if you're just getting started, I don't know what just happened there. If you're just getting started, 32, 28-inch, any of these things in a medium action, and you're going to be able to catch just about any fish in the lake. Guys, thank you so much for watching. One more time, if you liked the video, do me a favor, hit that subscribe and that like button. Until next time, keep living your North Prairie life.